You know, I once called Star Trek Into Darkness a terrible movie. See, there it is. And you know what? I was absolutely right. It was a dumb, pointless, incoherent rehash of old ideas that had been done far better 30 years earlier. But there's one movie that may be more dumb, pointless, and incoherent even than this. A film so shitty that it basically killed Star Trek as a viable cinematic property. A film named Star Trek Beyond, the third installment of the rebooted Trek universe. Ever wanted to see James Kirk jumping over an enemy base on a motorbike? Ever wanted to see the Enterprise get blown up, crash land on a planet, and then get flipped over like a fucking tiddlywink? Ever wanted to see an enemy battle fleet get defeated by the raw power of a Beastie Boys track? Ever wanted the whole thing to be directed by that guy who does the dumb car movies? Well, then I guess Star Trek Beyond is the film for you. For those of us who remember when Star Trek was actually smart and creative and mature, it's a bit like watching a toddler finger painting on the Mona Lisa with their own poo. But what really surprises me is the number of critics that seem to think this was a really good movie. Jesus, even Red Letter Media were singing its praises. No, Mike, you were the chosen one! Well, the drinker isn't so easily convinced. A reckoning is in order, and it seems like I'm the only man left to do it. So set your phasers to fucked once more, because just like Tatiana when she does one of her special massages, I'm gonna break this one down and make it hurt. So Beyond kicks off with yet another wacky mission for James T. Kirk. This time he's doing some diplomatic bullshit to broker a peace treaty with a planet of giant monster things. But then they get mad and try to attack him, and it turns out that they're actually tiny monster things. Oh, how we laughed. I feel like I'm watching Star Wars crossed with Jurassic Park. Anyway, Kirk escapes and beams back up to the Enterprise with an ancient relic from another species that we never meet. How did they come by it? Don't know. What matters is that Spock puts the ancient relic away in storage. Keep that one in mind because it'll be important to whatever passes for a plot later. With another unsuccessful mission completed, Kirk says fuck it and goes away to get drunk with McCoy. It's his birthday, you see, but he's in no mood for cake and strippers. It seems he's feeling bored and discontent with their deep space mission, and he's worried that his life is kind of directionless now. Cry me a fucking river, mate. You've got like the most exciting job in the universe and you're still bitching about it. You know, I tore Into Darkness a new one for shamelessly recycling character arcs and iconic moments without the context and history that once made them so impactful, and this shitty movie is doing the exact same thing within the first 5 minutes. A discontented Kirk celebrating an unwelcome birthday and confiding his growing unhappiness over a somber drink with McCoy? Where have we seen this before? Jesus, they even have the same dark lighting as Kirk's apartment in Wrath of Khan. The difference here is that Kirk in Wrath of Khan had just turned 50 years old. He was a middle-aged man now, promoted to an unrewarding desk job, and facing up to the unpleasant realization that his best days were now behind him. It made sense that he was feeling restless and dissatisfied with his life, wondering where it was all leading. But this version of Kirk is still in his prime. He's captain of the Enterprise, and leading his crew to explore deep space. This is the exact stuff that James T. Kirk lives for. It's all he's ever wanted to do with his life, and his biggest fear was having it taken away.
Commanding a starship is your first best destiny. Anything else is a waste of material.
So why the change? Well, because the writers wanted this movie to be all about characters questioning their path in life, and because they lack even a tiny spark of imagination and original thought, they took the character arc of a much older man in a completely different situation and tried to awkwardly graft it onto someone who has no logical reason to feel this way. It's a bit like inventing a dildo that's also a food blender. It's just not a good idea. Believe that. Anyway, the Enterprise docks at Starbase Yorktown for a bit of shore leave. And I know this is kind of a nitpick in the great scheme of things, but aren't starbases supposed to be given numbers instead of names? I thought names were reserved for starships that actually go places. I say this because the Yorktown becomes kind of important to the plot later, and every time a character referred to it, I kept thinking they were talking about a ship, and that made my brain hurt. Nah, whatever. Now that the crew are ashore, it's time for some interpersonal drama. Spock and Uhura have just broken up with each other.
No way!
Oh no, what a shame. Their relationship was so compelling and believable. What's even dumber is that directly after this, Spock receives word that old Spock from the future has just died of old age. Now this was a nice little tribute to the real life death of Leonard Nimoy. The problem is that it's very obvious that this scene was added in later because it doesn't flow with the events of the story at all. Like, wouldn't it have made more sense that the death of old Spock should come earlier, prompting young Spock to re-examine his life and question his relationship with Uhura? But then that would require logical, intelligent writing, and that's not what this movie's about. Also, Sulu's gay now for some reason. Fuck knows why, when it was never even hinted at in the original series or movies. In fact, if anything, he seemed like kind of a ladies' man when he got going. Is it because George Takei is gay in real life? You understand there's a difference between characters and the actors who play them, right?
Don't call me Tiny.
Anyway, I guess it's time for the actual plot to get going. So an escape pod approaches the Yorktown with a lone survivor on board, who claims that her ship crashed on an uncharted planet in a nearby nebula, and she needs someone to go rescue the crew. That's interesting. What was her ship doing in this nebula? How and why did it crash? Was it attacked? If so, by whom? How did this girl manage to escape when no one else did? Why is the nebula uncharted if it's so close to the Yorktown? If it's really far away, then how did she manage to get here in an escape pod? These are all valid questions that sensible people would probably ask before mounting a rescue mission with the Federation flagship. Wouldn't a sketchy story like this seem like a very obvious attempt to lure them into a remote location where they could be easily cut off and ambushed? Don't think about it too much. This fucking idiot obviously didn't, because she's got more important things to talk about.
The only ship here with more advanced technology is still under construction.
How is that in any way relevant to current events? Will it be relevant by the end of the movie? How many cigarettes do you have to smoke to end up with a voice like this?
But it's not just the ship that I'm sending.
Anyway, Admiral Chainsmoker sends Kirk off to the nebula to do the rescue thing, and it's weird because they're just able to fly through it without the slightest problem. Wow, kinda makes you wonder why nobody else has ever explored this place until now. But whatever. They arrive at the planet, but then they spot an enemy ship that comes right at them. They open fire on it, but it turns out to be a massive swarm of smaller ships that quickly tear the Enterprise apart. And I guess shields just aren't a thing now. Jesus Christ, is there ever a scenario where the Enterprise doesn't get its ass kicked? I really didn't think it was possible to emasculate a starship, but somehow these movies have found a way to do it. Anyway, the drone ships breach the hull and a bunch of generic aliens fight their way on board, led by some asshole named Kral. But Kral's not interested in taking over the ship. Remember the artifact that Kirk brought back from his wacky adventure at the start of the movie? Well, that's what Kral's after. So there's fighting and explosions and the ship gets split in half, and I guess the artifact goes missing in the chaos because Kral spends the rest of the movie trying to recover it. Meanwhile, Kirk orders the crew to abandon ship as the Enterprise goes down in flames. Where have I seen this before? Yep, I guess we ran out of stuff to steal from Wrath of Khan, so we've moved on to search for Spock now. Remember when the Enterprise self-destructed and Kirk and the others stood on the surface of the Genesis planet, watching sadly as the remains crashed through the atmosphere? That was a good scene that made people feel emotions. This one didn't. The thing is, once you remove the context and history behind a scene and don't give it even a second to breathe or sink in, then it kind of loses its impact. The loss of the Enterprise in search for Spock was perfectly played out, with Kirk reluctantly sacrificing his ship as a last resort to save his friends. You can see how much it hurt him to do it, how much the Enterprise meant to him after so many years in command, and so you empathised with his loss.
My God, Bones. What have I done?
What you had to do. What you always do. Turn death into a fighting chance to live.
I'd also like to point out that Search for Spock was actually a really good movie that's way better than anything New Trek has ever produced. But here, there's so much shit going on all at once that you barely even have a chance to register what's happening. The ship's fucked anyway, and it's not like this is a willing sacrifice on Kirk's part. It's just another thing that happens in the relentless cavalcade of nonsense that passes for the film's plot. Anyway, back to the story, I guess. So the crew evacuate to the planet's surface in their escape pods, and naturally they get separated into smaller groups. Kirk and Chekhov wind up together, and so do McCoy and Spock. Uhura and Sulu get captured by by the generic aliens who are keeping the crew hostage while they try to recover the artifact. Scotty, meanwhile, runs into another survivor on the planet's surface. This is Jayla, a strong female plot device that basically exists to provide exposition and allow the rest of the story to happen. Jayla saves Scotty's life and fights off some random scavengers, and when she learns that he's an engineer, well, the conversation goes a bit weird, to be honest. Consider the following.
Come with me. Now.
Okay, so she wants you to go with her and fix something. That makes sense.
Wait, now hang on a minute, lassie. I'm having a difficult day here. I've got to find my crewmates.
But you're more concerned about finding your friends first. I can totally understand that.
I will help you find your mates. And then you will help me.
So Jayla agrees to help you find your crew, and then you'll help her. Seems like we've got ourselves a deal. No need to take this conversation any further.
You want me to fix something?
Yes, you help me, and I help you.
Don't do it, Scotty. She said she was gonna help you first.
Alright, well, things being as they are, I doubt I'll get a better offer today, so lead the way.
Wait, what the fuck are you doing, Scotty? I thought she was gonna help you find the others first. Why are you actively making this deal less advantageous for yourself? Did anyone even proofread this script? So she brings Scotty back to her home, which turns out to be a crashed Federation starship that's just been sitting out in the woods for like 100 years. I wonder what became of the crew. I'm sure that won't be relevant later. Anyway, the various groups all end up reuniting and stage a rescue mission to recover the Enterprise survivors, which involves Kirk riding a motorbike because it looks cool, and Jayla fighting the aliens hand to hand because it looks cool, and the crew using a Beastie Boys song to destroy the alien drone swarm because it sounds cool. It's all very cool. Unfortunately, cool isn't very deep. Cool isn't clever or thought-provoking, which is kind of the reason people used to watch Star Trek. This is also where we discover Krall's true identity, in the least shocking plot twist ever. Are you ready for this? He and the other aliens are actually the original crew of the crashed starship. They got marooned here like 100 years ago, but luckily the planet was covered with abandoned alien technology that they used to prolong their lives. Where did this technology come from, and who abandoned it? Don't know, but the life extension technology gradually caused them to turn into aliens, and they also adopted a new language and new names. Why? Don't know. The point is that Krall wants the alien artifact because it's the final component of an ancient bioweapon that he plans to unleash on the Yorktown as revenge for the Federation abandoning him. Jesus, and I thought the plot for Into Darkness was full of holes. Let's see if we can break this genius plan down a little, shall we? So Krall and his crew get stranded on this planet, which conveniently has both life extension technology and a huge armada of fully functional drone ships just waiting for someone to claim them. Wow, that was lucky. They promptly forget about their own ship and spend the next couple of centuries just hanging around waiting for something to happen, instead of, repairing their ship or using the drones to escape. Okay. Then they decide to launch an attack against their own people to trigger an interstellar war, because they don't like how the Federation has become peaceful and unified. And for this task, they decide to recover the pieces of an ancient bioweapon, even though they already have a massive fleet of drone ships that are more than capable of tearing apart the best starship in the Federation. Okay. So they send a lone messenger out to the Yorktown to lure the Federation into the world's most obvious ambush so that they can board the Enterprise, recover the artifact, and complete the bioweapon. Because they totally knew that the Enterprise would be the one to mount the rescue mission, and that it would still have the artifact on board, and that nobody would come looking for them once they vanished.
Isn't that logical?
I'd like to point out that literally none of this would even be happening if Kirk's goofy little mission in the first 5 minutes of the movie had been a success. What the fuck mothering Christ is going on here? This plan is the most contrived, nonsensical, redundant bullshit that I think I've ever heard. Its success depends on at least half a dozen factors that are completely out of Krall's control. And even if there's some kind of miracle and everything plays out exactly as he needs it to, he already has a weapon that's more powerful and versatile than the bioweapon he's spent centuries looking for. Not to mention that his entire motivation for doing all of this is that he's basically a mad guy who just likes war. The absolute state of Star Trek. Anyway, I guess it's time for the big showdown. So Kirk and the others pursue Krall to the Yorktown in the antique Starship, which somehow still functions despite being abandoned on the planet for over 100 years. Damn, these things were really built to last. And there's a big chase and stuff explodes again, and then Kirk ejects Krall out into space along with the bioweapon. And the movie ends with Kirk telling Admiral Chainsmoker that he's decided to stay on as captain of the Enterprise. Spock and Uhura get back together, yay! And the crew inherit a brand new Enterprise, so everything can go back to the way it was. And that's it, that's the plot for Star Trek Beyond Stupidity. If my thrilling plot summary hasn't made it obvious already, let me say it loud and clear. This movie fucking sucks. It sucks for all the same reasons as the other rebooted Trek movies, plus some entirely new ones. For a start, there's the plot. It's basically a series of dumb, superficial action set pieces that look like they were ported over from an entirely different film, strung together by a dumb as fuck script that relies almost entirely on coincidence, convenience, and contrivance just to get from A to B. The villain's plan and motivations make absolutely no sense from any perspective, to the point where I actually experienced some kind of existential crisis as I tried to wrap my head around it. Was it me, I began to wonder? Was I just not seeing what my peers were seeing in this film? Is it okay to bleed from the ears? It's basically the exact same mad guy with a doomsday device that we've seen twice already with New Trek. And shit, it was kind of overused even by the time Nemesis rolled around, and that was nearly 20 years ago. Then there's the character arcs and events stolen from other Star Trek movies and stripped of their meaning and emotion. Whether it's the destruction of the Enterprise, or a Kirk that's inexplicably old and world-weary before his time, it feels exactly like what it is. Old concepts reshaped and awkwardly jammed into a movie that's basically a conglomeration of half-baked, hastily implemented ideas. And when you consider the problems this film had behind the scenes, it's easy to see why this shit happened. The original script tried to move away from the grim, convoluted violence of Into Darkness, hoping to recapture the optimistic spirit of classic Star Trek, only to be rejected as too Star Trek-y. Fuck off, Paramount. With deadlines looming and time running out, Simon Pegg was brought in at the 11th hour to help rewrite the script, hence the haphazard plot, the fuzzy character motivations, and the unusually high amount of Simon Pegg screen time. But the end result of all this is a film that feels like watery soup, with the occasional chunk of interesting content floating in its depths. It looks lovely visually, and if you gauge a movie's quality by the amount of stuff that explodes, then it'll probably make you happy. But at its heart, it's a movie that doesn't have anything interesting to say about its characters or the world they live in. A movie that doesn't challenge the viewer to expand their horizons or see things from a different perspective. A movie that doesn't feel like Star Trek in the slightest. Hopefully this represents the endpoint of the god-awful Kelvin timeline. Now we just need to get rid of Discovery, Lower Decks and Picard, and perhaps then Star Trek can rest in peace. Anyway, that's all I've got for today. Go away now!